Meet Happy Goggles, a virtual reality viewer made from a Happy Meal box.
This is how you eat a Big Mac.
Disrupt.
In 1948, brothers Maurice and Richard McDonald's started the first restaurant by converting what was previously their drive-through barbecue joint into a milkshake and burger restaurant. So before, the restaurants around that area would have waiters and waitresses serving traditional style burgers, fries, and milkshakes, but that came at a higher cost to the customer. The brothers changed this system by installing self-service counters like the ones we see today. And instead of cooking each meal as it was ordered, they prepared the meals ahead of time and kept them warm. This allowed them to serve their meals at nearly half the cost of surrounding restaurants, solidifying their place in the San Bernardino
Hamburger
market.
Perhaps you're wondering why I'm telling you all this. And I wonder myself.
This is a multi-mixer. And in the early 1950s, a few McDonald's restaurants bought them from this guy called Ray Kroc. As the legend goes, Ray was visiting one of the stores that he supplied and saw how their low food prices and unique setup could form a thriving business if they would only franchise. Franchising is when a company creates a system for an individual or group to start and operate their own individual piece of the company. So rather than the company employing, say, a manager to oversee the restaurant over here, the restaurant over there would be owned by an individual who could then employ their own manager. This sort of gives each owner of the restaurant more of a stake in the success of the store because they own a part of it. Hey, did you know that every second, over 75 burgers are sold at McDonald's? So since the beginning of this video, over
9,000
have been sold. By 1956, the recently hired Harry Sonnenborn would create and pitch the Sonnenborn model, which says that McDonald's would own the land in which a restaurant sits in. So rather than putting the financial burden of buying the land plus building the restaurant solely on the shoulders of the franchisee, the corporation would own the land and then sublease it to the franchisee. This would not only create a steady source of revenue from the sales of the restaurant for the corporation, but also from the rent paid by the franchisee if their restaurant proved to be profitable. And this is an interesting example, I think, of someone entering a field and thinking outside the box, right? It's so easy to get caught up in the way of thinking that came in the previous people within that industry, like whether it be game development, content creation, pretty much any field has specific ways of doing things. But when someone comes in and changes that way of doing things, sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, like in the case of the hula burger. 2 slices of cheese, a pineapple, and some buns. The Sonnenborn model was proving successful, and Ray Kroc, the multi-mixer salesman from before, bought out the original McDonald's brothers for $2.6 million, which, adjusted for inflation, is around $22.3 million in today's money. By 1962, the burger joint would launch the Golden Arches logo and would then unleash the beast. But why the clown? This question has haunted me for many years. When writing this video, I feared what I may uncover. But for the sake of the viewer, I must venture into this rabbit hole. I do not know what I will find, but I know I must find it. The origins of this elusive clown date back to as far as 1950. In the antenna box known as the television, a children's themed TV show would feature a zany character known as Bozo the Clown. In the second half of the 20th century, Bozo would gain wide popularity in the North American market, but by 1963, ratings dropped off, and the show was canceled. But then, an advertising executive from McDonald's named Barry Klein saw an opportunity to capitalize on the familiarity of the clown in the public psyche. He reached out to Willard Scott, and together they formed this.
Delicious McDonald's hamburgers.
At first, he appeared in just 3 local McDonald's commercials around the DC area, but then the corporate suits at the McDonald's corporate headquarters wanted to bring him into the national spotlight. So they enlisted the help of a clown from the Ringling Brothers to give the character a makeover. The result is what we see today.
ran away.
Hi, Grimace. I know what I'm that one.
From 1988 to 1996, McDonald's would double its number of restaurants to a total of 20,000. And just before the turn of the century, the company had expanded its reach outside of the US with 11,000 more restaurants across the world. In 2019, McDonald's acquired an artificial intelligence company called Apprenti. The company is focused on building speech-based conversational agents. We're also seeing a lot more of those automated self-service kiosks at restaurants. So I think you and I are alive in a time where we're going to see more of these companies automating their workforce. I think this brings some short-term negative effects, like as an example, the loss of jobs. But long-term, it's at the very least interesting to see this transitional period. I don't think it's far off that we could see restaurants that are fully automated. Like the food is prepared and served by automated systems with perhaps a few human employees overseeing the systems of automation. One has to assume a large portion of McDonald's or any restaurant's budget each year is going to the thousands of employees they hire to run the restaurants, cook the food, etc. If a significant portion of that number is cut due to automation, we'll see a fundamental shift in what it means to own and operate and start and run a business, right? So then to be an entrepreneur in the 2020s, 2030s, 2040s, and beyond, I think it means to build systems that work symbiotically with AI and automation to ensure the future proofing of a business model, right? Amazon, Alibaba, like most of these companies rely on humans to, say, pick up packages, boxes, move them around warehouses. If a robot like the Boston Dynamics one can essentially do this job of lifting things, or even robotic arms that can cook and flip burgers or flip fries, these systems could run 24/7. So then it becomes like a mass experiment in our planet, in the humankind. Like what happens when a company can automate to such an extent as that? In the words of Bob Dylan, also, the McDonald's drive-thru staff will not serve you if you drive through on a horse.
Did you feel a lot of complacency these days that the incumbents then let you feel that you are, I mean, the kind of hopeless disruptor, but they know how to do it, or?
So a few months back, I was at my uncle's house, right? And he told me about all the things that he was doing while working at SpaceX. And he told me specifically that we were going to put satellites into space that were going to give everybody free internet. And that left me to thinking that, wait, hold on, free internet? Why? And he's like, oh, because it's going to be really cheap. This gave me the thought that, that's weird. Maybe we can buy really expensive things or something that is really fast, such as really fast computers, for something that's dirt cheap. Because a few months ago, you probably saw that NVIDIA pushed out their RTX cards, their RTX 30 cards, right? And they were cheaper than last generations. Same thing with Oculus. So I'm starting to see that in the future we'll be able to buy best things for free.
Yeah, I think this is just going to be like a nerd out session on economics and capitalism. But I think that's for all of the issues that can come with the system. I think what we see in the free market, the economy, is just like you mentioned, like that, like products that were extremely expensive yesterday are more affordable today, and I think that's a net positive for humanity, because it's like, what is that example of like the human genome, right? Okay, so this is like the chart that is incredible in terms of like the technology unlocking you know, markets and free market. But it's like, you know, when we first figured out how to do the human genome thing, I'm not gonna act like I know what I'm talking about in terms of the human genome, but in the initial part in 2001 it was $100 million, and then obviously as the years go forward, 19-20 years, it's now less than $1,000. So it's like, yeah, we're seeing these emergences of new technology, and then it just gets cheaper and cheaper. Yeah, it's cool, man. I think like before, I think for all of the issues that come with capitalism, in terms of, I think there is a big gap. Like there is a growing gap. But I think the flip side is that if an individual is armed with the tools to create, market, and sell and use the machine of capitalism, then they can begin to close that gap in their individual life and for their family, aided by the widespread availability of technology. The issue is then, how do you make that information widespread? And I think it is, because then again, we're seeing with the internet, like, it's the information to create, to sell, to market, to distribute, to find a job, to
attention all Andromedans.
Basically, you know, self-educate is available on the internet. And so, yeah, it's awesome that they're making this widespread by using the machine of capitalism. Anyways, great question, thank you. Or great statement, thank you, rather.
How you know? Feel what? Let me see that stuff.